Our Family Coalition is an organization that serves families with lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender members in the San Francisco Bay Area. Among other functions, it sponsors a number of social events each year, including some tied to the holidays.
We've got get-togethers that are for small kids, get-togethers for big kids, get-togethers for the whole family. We gather at zoos, at museums, at the beach, at picnics, and places like that. We also have activities in the evening for parents that are more educational, and we have all-day events as well that are both social and educational, and sometimes have a political component in terms of helping people understand what's going on legally in areas that interest us.
You know, the truth of it is that many of us don't have biological families that support them, and many, lesbian, gay, transgender families don't have, social, economic, school support and stuff. So we have to do community organizing in order to create the structures to be able to be okay sometimes.
We need to protect our children. We need to let them know that they're loved and that they're healthy and that they've got all the rights and privileges of being Americans as any other American does.
I think Our Family Coalition has been at the forefront in challenging the separate but equal kind of mentality about our families and saying that did not work in racial discrimination and segregation, and it is not working now with our families. And they're really, I love the name, Our Family Coalition. It's about everybody. It's not about exclusion, it's about inclusion, and it's about creating this wonderful, smorgasbord table for us all to sit down and eat at.
And yet many at that table are fearful of gays and lesbians, viewing them as a threat to traditional heterosexual families.
Gay and lesbian parents don't necessarily raise gay and lesbian children, and I think that's the big fear. People are just worried that there's some kind of club we're going to indoctrinate our kids in. But you can't determine that. You cannot determine one's sexuality no more than you can determine their hair color before hair dye or any other aspect of their being.
The truth of it is that we were raised in heterosexual families, and we were raised with the expectation of everyone around us that we were going to be straight, and we're not. And, both of us experience from very, very young ages attractions to people of the same gender.
The vast majority of children who have gay and lesbian parents do not turn out to be gay. The majority turn out to be straight. And the majority of gays and lesbians, as we do know, did not have gay and lesbian parents. They came from heterosexual parents. So we do know that there's no direct transmission one way or the other.
Gay men and women come to parenting with great love and devotion and concern and passion and creativity and hope and faith in the good intentions and our own ability to create great families with great people, kids who will grow up to make really wonderful contributions to society.
We found that time and again, research on this issue has emphasized that children who grow up with gay parents tend to do as well and to turn out in ways very similar to those who grew up with two biological married parents.
What works in most families works in other kinds of families. It doesn't matter if the parents are lesbian or gay, step-parents or not, married or not. Good parenting is good parenting.
We have to be much, much more intentional than I think many heterosexual couples may need to be, because for one thing, we can't just boom, get knocked up and have a baby. You know, we have to plan it, we have to decide. We went through a whole process of deciding whether we wanted to have a known donor or go to a sperm bank, whether we wanted to adopt or be foster parents, you know, and those were all options for us in this state. For many lesbian parents, being foster parents isn't an option. Adoption isn't an option. It's illegal in many states in the country right now. And you think, here are these wonderful people who want to have children who don't have that opportunity. And it's one of the reasons that we pay a lot of money and struggle really hard to stay in the Bay Area, because we have the legal right to be who we are and raise our, you know, relatively speaking to many other places in the country.
The social climate may be more tolerant in San Francisco than in many other cities, but like gay and lesbian parents everywhere, those in the Bay Area must still prepare their children for the negative reactions they're almost certain to encounter at some point.
You know, we're fortunate here in Oakland that we'll be able to choose a school that we want to send her to, and we will look for schools that are queer-friendly and that have different, that's multicultural. When she asks us questions, we'll answer them honestly. And when she says somebody at school called me names because they know that my parents are two women, you know, we'll say, well, you know, that's okay. It's okay that we're two women, and that, you know, there's discrimination in the world, and this is a form of it.
So we still have a ways to go before we all figure out the right way to communicate with our kids about who we are in the context of our larger communities. It's really important for us to communicate to the kids, make them aware that we know that we're different, but that we're proud, and that these kids are lucky, and most of all, that these kids are loved. Because once you have that foundation of love and self-respect, and teach these kids how important it is to love thy neighbor and to treat people as if you'd want yourself treated, I think then you've got everything else covered.
Regardless of their sexual orientation or other defining characteristics, nearly all parents exert a level of influence on their children that goes beyond any other single factor.
Every study I've ever seen, every study I've conducted, and all the kids I've ever observed, even when I wasn't studying them, tell me that the most important influence in a child's life from the time they're born until the time they're, I don't know, 21, and indeed I probably believe 50, is still the parent. Kids may argue with their parents, kids may disagree, kids may take a very different track, but for the most part, most kids have that parental voice right there.
Of course, education provides many of the specific intellectual skills that children as adults will need. But the core person as a human being is very much influenced by the experiences with their parents.
I still hear my parents when I'm doing something that I know my mother would be upset about, and it's been a lot of years, but that voice is still there.
Parents can influence their children not only by what they say, but by what they do. For better or worse, they serve as role models, setting examples through their daily interaction with other family members.
Therefore, you have a responsibility as a parent to display properties, behaviors that your child admires, like control of your temper, fairness, justice, kindness, love, tolerance, curiosity. Teachers can't do that, and peers can't do that. No child identifies with a friend or a teacher the way the child identifies with a parent.
Parents play an especially critical role in communicating values to their children.
What do you care about? Being beautiful? If my little girl is pretty, she'll probably get a wonderful husband and have a happy life. That's a belief. That's the parent's job. What values are they going to communicate? And in doing that, they have to be consistent. So that's very important. Oh, and the child is vulnerable to believing that he is of little value. Now that's easy because he or she is small, weak, less confident than adults, makes no contribution. So it needs reassurance that it is a thing of value. So those are the things: role models, values, consistency in promoting them, and communicating to the child that he or she is valued. That's what parents do. And that's important.
Parents also exert influence by shaping the kinds of experiences their children will have.
Do they read to their children starting from the moment they're born? Do they have a large vocabulary themselves that they use with the child? Children that grow up in homes like that are advantaged when they get to school. There's research that discusses the role of cultural exposures in children's achievement, and they find that children who have a lot of experiences visiting museums and visiting concerts and traveling seem to have what we would call more hooks that they can connect material they're learning in school to.
While providing a broad range of intellectual and cultural stimulation does seem to be beneficial, some parents may go too far in pushing their child's mental or physical development.
In the first year of life, it is really absurd because they literally I'm trying to teach him to sit up, I'm trying to teach him to stand. But when an infant is ready to do something, you can't stop them. Anyone who has raised children knows when they want to stand or walk, and if you try to sit them down or lie them down, they're not having it. They're so excited about practicing their latest skill. And another milestone they're always worried about is the talking, of course. And at first they kept, they compare how many words, when, and all that. And then when they start talking, they talk everybody out of house and home and drive them crazy.
If you were born with Mozart's biology, then yes, getting the child started on the piano when he's 3 or 4 is probably useful. You can make a child anxious, an 18-month-old child anxious by reading to them and presenting them cards with letters on them. I mean, they don't know what's going on.
It gets into this whole business about the pressured baby and the pressured child, where nursery schools now begin to teach academics and where children are no longer given the freedom to do what we call experiential learning, where they learn about space and doing things and so on by trying it and failing and getting the pleasure of succeeding and all, but where they're being taught in nursery schools. And mothers choose nursery schools by how much, quotes, academics. And he's been in the nursery school a year, doesn't know his letters,
Yeah, there's no harm in showing children letters, but then the parents shouldn't get upset if the child is bored by the entire enterprise. Gentle common sense here is important. And so I think you can accomplish most of it by reading to the child, talking to the child, playing with the child, and creating joy over matters that are intellectual. Joy, not anxiety over failure, but joy in the act. That recipe is much more likely to give you the goal you want.
Early childhood is a time when parents play an especially central role in a child's life. But there's another period, known as adolescence, when the role of parents can be just as significant and often even more challenging.
I don't want to talk. Leave me alone.
Adolescence is the stage of life that stands between childhood and adulthood. It is often a time of great confusion and conflicting expectations, both for adolescents and for their parents.
If we take away all the romance of youth and really look at the population under consideration, we're looking at poor people who have no rights, people without real civil liberties, whose lives are completely controlled by adults, over-regulated, who have no real access to resources or power.
Small wonder, then, that the task of parenting an often angry and resentful adolescent can at times seem overwhelming.
It's very important for a parent to give an adolescent psychological space while still maintaining an emotionally close relationship. This is really hard for parents to do because when adolescents begin to distance themselves from their parents often take it as some kind of personal rejection. There's a kind of de-idealization of parents that goes on during this time, but that is all in the service of developing a separate sense of self, a separate sense of identity. So one of the things that's important for parents to do is to allow this process to happen. So what we often advise parents is to kind of protect your child, your adolescent, from harm, from dangerous things. But on issues where there isn't a lot of harm involved, to let your adolescent do the experimentation and exploration and have the independence that he or she's going to need to develop a mature sense of self.
I think young people and adults live in discontinuous orbits. That if you're somebody's teacher or their parent, you have some structural authority over them. Your focus is necessarily different. Even if you try really hard, They may not want to share their subcultural interests with you or their private world with you, no matter how much they like you. And direct questioning will never get you the answer that you need. You almost have to become invisible and attract them in a way. It's a really hard thing. I don't always blame adults. I don't think blame is really the right word. I think that it's just the way it is, that young people will really, really jealously guard what little sacred space they have.
That process can lead to intense conflict between parent and child.
What are you so upset about?
The conflict is not about big things. It's about trivial things, like picking up your clothes off of the floor, or how late you can stay out on Thursday nights, or what time of day you do your studying. But kids and parents really go at this in a very intense way that is so much more intense than the issue would warrant, that we think it means something more than what the issue is. And we now understand that this bickering and squabbling that takes place between parents and kids when the kids are 11, 12, 13 years old is part of the process of kids developing a sense of autonomy and a sense of independence from their parents.
Do what you want, I give up. Mama, please. The only one you think about is yourself.
Clearly, parenting is not a static experience. The relationship between parents and children changes as children get older. But there are many other factors besides the passage of time that shape the parent-child relationship. One of these is a family's social class.
Parents who are working in blue-collar jobs and in lower-end jobs learn day in and day out that to get along and to keep their jobs secure and to be able to provide for their families, they're going to have to adapt to a certain set of job conditions that will be repetitive, where they will not have a lot of ability to make their own decisions and be autonomous, where they will have to learn to conform to the dictates of authority, of their bosses, and so on.
In many such working-class families, parents teach their children the value of obedience and conformity. In many middle-class families, on the other hand, parental emphasis is often less on following the rules than on spontaneity, creativity, and assertiveness.
Well, middle-class parents teach their children often to intervene in institutions, as middle-class parents intervene. And so when we went to doctor visits, for example, we noticed that some of the middle-class parents would prepare their children for the doctor visit. So one middle-class mother would say, "Now, Alexander, we're going to the doctor. I want you to be thinking if you have any questions for the doctor." This was a black middle-class boy. And he said, "Well, I have some bumps under my arm from my deodorant." She said, "Okay, well, you should ask the doctor about that." And when we got into the doctor's office, he produced his question, and the doctor took it seriously. And the mother was training the boy in how to intervene with people in positions of authority. When we went to the doctor's office with an African-American poor family, we noticed the doctor was asking questions about did the boy have any birthmarks? And the little girl, his sister, raised her arm and said, "I have a birthmark." And her mother said, "Will you cool it?" And the mother was treating the doctor's time as valuable time. She was not training her daughter to intervene with people in positions of authority.
The link between social class and parental attitudes about authority can also affect the ways in which parents discipline their children. In studies of middle or upper middle class families, parents generally try to resolve conflict by reasoning with their children.
In that process, they often tolerated a great deal of disrespect from their children. So children could say things like, I hate you, you never get it. And the parents just presumed that that was part of their child rearing. In working class and poor families, there was less talk. Often parents didn't ask questions to their children, but they made comments about the children to others. Parents didn't see children as viable conversation partners in the same way that middle class parents did. And when parents did talk, sometimes they would give directives.
And sometimes they would forego verbal communication altogether, opting instead to use corporal punishment as a means by which to communicate.
It is not necessary to physically punish a child in order to produce a socialized child with a good conscience and high character. But having said that, a spank on the bottom is not a traumatic event because the child understands what that means.
The concept of using physical punishment has been a long-term debate, and the American Academy of Pediatrics is not a proponent of that type of punishment. I find that you've got to meet parents where they're at. A lot of black mothers, specifically, who are deeply religious, believe spare the rod, spoil the child, and that's straight from the Bible. And they quote the Bible and they said, look, this is what God says and this is what I'm going to do, and my mom did this, I came out okay.
Regardless of a child's age or a family's social class, the role parents play in their children's lives is as important today as it's ever been. But that's not to say there haven't been major changes in parenting.
So men are doing more, but the biggest change is women are doing less. They have better opportunities now. They have interesting jobs, though. The women are getting more education. It's hard to go back home and be with little kids all day if you've been at work, as difficult as a lot of jobs are. So she's doing less, he's doing a teeny bit more, and people are getting less care.
We do know that women who are trying to do the double workday, to hold a full-time job and do all the child care and housework, their mental health suffers. So far, and it's probably because men are starting at a low base level, that when they do more, they do not become more depressed. In fact, they develop the nurturing sides of themselves. One of the most interesting findings from my research is that men who don't feel competent on an emotional level develop that competency through their parenting. So by helping a kid through a bout with the flu, by helping a son or a daughter deal with a difficult peer, and by holding a kid when they get hurt and start crying, men develop the emotional capacity to monitor, to tune in, to ask questions, to do those sort of things that we used to think of as only feminine behaviors.
Clearly, childcare is no longer the exclusive domain of just mothers. But in many families, neither parent provides the bulk of the care. Instead, the job is farmed out. While some see this as a source of serious family problems, others contend the impact of outside-the-home childcare has been much more positive than is generally believed.
My reading of the evidence to date is that the labor force participation of moms has not seriously negatively impacted children's well-being. In my own research, I have found, for example, that when women work, particularly when single mothers work, children do better. I have found that mothers can serve as important occupational role models to not just their daughters, but also to their sons. And in most of the research that I've done, I have uncovered, witnessed, produced very few significant negative correlations between maternal employment and children's educational and occupational long-term success.
Still, many experts argue that the child care system in the U.S. is far from ideal, especially for those families facing serious financial challenges.
The children spend long hours in child care, and yet the turnover rate is 1 out of 3 among child care workers in child care centers. And the reason for that is that they're paid very low wages, less than dog catchers or the people that collect money from parking meters. Most child care is not good child care, and since we're squeezing time out of our parents and not letting them have the time that they would want or need at home, and we're putting them into poor child care arrangements, this is a problem.
So it really is a kind of anarchic, balkanized system where people are scrambling to get care. The scrambling, if you're low income, is to try to get subsidies. What we found in our research in Oakland, which crosses lines of class and immigration, is that lower income families often rely heavily on extended kin, on sibling care, and on children's self-care. There are a lot of kids, going home, and there will often be family rules. You have to keep the door locked, you can't use the stove. The mother will call from work now and then to make sure the child is okay. In contrast, those with the money, often their organization of care seems like one big shopping expedition.
But even for those families with financial security, the job of parenting is an enormous challenge. In fact, some experts recommend that prospective parents take classes prior to actually having children. Not so much to acquire mechanical skills, like changing diapers, but to gain valuable insights into how children think and feel. And perhaps, even more important, to learn what may be the single most important lesson about good parenting.
Of all the important things we've learned from a half a century of research on parenting and child development is that kids thrive when they feel loved by their parents, and that there is no maximum amount of love that kids should receive. That is, there's no reason to hold back in terms of loving your child, being physically affectionate, praising your child. You can't spoil a child with love. You can spoil a child with material possessions. You can spoil your child by giving that child things instead of genuine love. But what we know from research is that the more warmth the child receives, the healthier that child will be.
Our Families Ourselves is an 18-part series about marriages and families. For information on this program and accompanying materials, call 1-800-576-2988 or visit us online at www.intellicom.org.